In terms of a design process, I would say this is now a refined concept idea, and we could maybe start considering this being ready to be included inside a scene so we can do a digital 3D rendering. So with the concept model, just to repeat this, when you start a design, you have a big problem. How do I make something that's creative and interesting? One strategy is simply try to break the bigger problem down into smaller problems. So, as I said in class, instead of working on fine details, block everything out first. So we started to work with very basic geometry. And also, for example, we lined up everything in a way so it's easier to work with, vertical, horizontal, the backrest is rotated. And then maybe we decided on some wood planks, positioned them, modeled them. And then, for example, as you can see here, I calculated the distance also between the backrest and the seating wood planks. And then I tried to position them so they're nice and harmonious, so you have nice and even steps. So basically, this then informed also where the backrest has to be. So everything looks in a nice relationship. Okay, good. So for digital rendering, even while this is maybe still a concept model, we still might want to include a little bit more of details. So for example, what's missing, if I hide actually the upholstery, there's nothing that tells the viewer in a digital rendering how will those parts be attached or fastened to each other. Do we wood glue it? Do we screw it? Do we maybe use wooden dowels so it's kind of like a mechanical design? So that's something we still need to include somehow. And for example, for the upholstery, well, do we have buttons that are between the wood and the upholstery? Is there Velcro? Will it be straps? There's no information how I would like this to be attached to the chair. So, and also there you can try to block things out rather very loosely. So even there you explore the idea of how you could do it, because you will see specifically with the wood element, we can use joinery or fastening elements just functionally to connect parts, but we can also visually use them maybe as a design element. So we can hide them or we can even show them. Okay, so the main reason why we want to include those also is simply the rendering will look more complete. There are more elements there, and you don't have to be hyper realistic with everything. If we just include some information, it gives more information to the viewer to see and to consider, and they will get the feeling that you actually not just built something, but you really conceptually thought about maybe later how everything could be put together, manufactured, assembled, and such. Okay, so let's start now with the fabric maybe first. So how do we create maybe a system that attaches the upholstery to the wood parts? And let's in this case maybe use some sort of a strap system. So I will go to here and let's switch this to global. I will shift S cursor to selected. Also, let me turn on my screencast so you see them. And I would like to maybe as a first idea for how to connect the upholstery to this chair by just using straps. So, how do I model these straps? Well, essentially a strap is a piece of fabric that loops and maybe via button or something else we tie it together. So we will do this first in a very basic way, maybe some sort of Velcro idea. So let's create a cube. You see the cube is at the center, and then in edit mode, we can scale this one down. And then in a side view, in an object mode, not in edit mode, but in object mode, maybe I move this one kind of like to here, there. and then in edit mode I can continue scaling along the appropriate axes, or just click on a face and push and pull these parts. Okay, and I try to get this one nice and snug. Good. Now this is a box. If this should be a loop, these two faces I selected, we have to remove. So select the faces, X, and delete face. Don't delete vertex because then everything is gone. Delete face. Okay, good. Now fabric is soft and round, so we need to have maybe a subdivision modifier, a solidify modifier, 2 millimeters material thickness, and just make sure that when we use the solidify modifier, you set your scale to 1, in case this maybe, let's say, is a little bit scaled, and the values will change. So always go to apply or Control A and then apply the scale. Good. So with the solidify added, now we can add a subdivision surface modifier to make it a tick rounder. And let's take a look what happens. Well, it will shrink, obviously, makes sense. And maybe the subdivision surface modifier we add on top. So we round everything and then we give it a thickness. Also we see I have to change the direction so it grows to the outside. Okay, so now how do I make this one flow better around? Well, last class I showed you how to do the loop cuts. In this case I will show you the fillet tool in mesh editing. So I could, for example, add a loop cut and a loop cut, and then I have to move these points. This works perfect, but as you can see, that's a little bit of work. So what I do instead is, with all these edges selected, then I can press Control B or spacebar bevel. You can also then search for the command. Okay. And then when you move your mouse a little bit, you see you can adjust the size of how, for example, an edge will be beveled. Currently this is set to something that looks like a chamfer. If we move the mouse wheel, you see we can add more details to it, but it's a little bit tricky to see this. So I will simply adjust this a little bit and then press left mouse button, and then maybe I go to a side view there, maybe zoom in. And then I can press T or open my toolbar, and at the bottom you should see now the bevel command and all information about it. So I would preferably like to have maybe 2 segments. And then the trick here is with the profile. You see, with a very low profile this turns inverse, and if I increase the profile, at one point I get kind of like this type of a structure. So this actually works like perfectly positioned loop cuts. Okay, and then you see the fabric flows nicer around it. Okay, so let me show this one more time. You just select all the individual edges you would like to bevel. So, and then Control B or spacebar, type in bevel. And then we simply slide the mouse a little bit, left mouse button click, and then you go to the toolbar, and at the bottom, sometimes it's actually down there, we just have to go to the tool settings, and then we can set here 2, and the profile we set to 1. Or I set everything, this is actually the redo last command. On the Mac I use command and then right mouse button. You see exactly the same. So we can specify the bevel command and the result afterwards. So with this done, I can show you a nice little trick. So let's go back to the modifier stack. So we round this, and then this rounded result, we give a volume. And if, for example, the solidify modifier is first, what happens? We give this a thickness and then re-round it. But you see that the edges become very elliptical. That's not what I want. Which is why in this case for a strap, first rounding and then the solidify, and now we do a double subdivision. So I add one at the end. So, and to refine this a little bit, Control R, move the mouse wheel or press 2, left mouse button click, escape, and then based on your orientation, S and Y, we scale these loop cuts apart. So we start to tighten that a little bit. And there you see now we actually round this nicely. Okay. This should be shaded smoothly, so spacebar, shade smooth. Good. Nice. So there we have now a very basic strap. But this looks actually more like a metallic bracket. Let's say this should be some sort of a Velcro system. So a little bit of a strap comes up and the top strap comes down. So we have to actually model this. But this is the basic layout. This so far is pretty good. And I will actually hide this part so it's easier to look at. Perfect. So what we will do in edit mode, let's say Control R here, I make a cut, Control R there, I make a cut, Control R there, I make a cut, and this one I delete. So you see, I open this one. And then maybe Control R, add two loop cuts to tighten those ends. And then the trick is trying to figure out now, well, maybe what can I do to make this look like it's nicely overlapping there. And then this one I have to move maybe to there. Okay, so this one, for example, there I add a loop cut. So I have geometry, so I can pull this to there. This edge will deform a little bit more like this because it's fabric. This one I can move. So you see, I try to not make it look like metal, but a little bit more like fabric. So a little bit of natural inaccuracies. So this one, let's say I move a little bit more to back to there and there. Here, maybe this we move in a little bit. Ching, ching, there. Okay. And maybe here one line. So I can push this one down. And this one now I rotate a little bit. And maybe put it there. So it looks like the fabric like peels off a little bit there. And you see, this actually looks already a lot better. Doesn't look like metal. Now you can really see there is some sort of a structure or something that overlaps. And that's all we need. So this one, maybe I can move to here. And now, because we want these parts not to all look like Borgs, being all the same, resistance is futile, we want every part to have their own little unique character. So we cannot use the mirror modifier, and we cannot use the link duplicate. So we have to make individual copies. Okay, but how do I now put this one over exactly on the other side? Well, fortunately, because we built everything based from the world center, this one along the y-axis is -8 something. So I can copy, Control C or Apple C, go to this object, paste this in, but then I have to adjust the value to positive so it goes to the other side. Perfect. Good. There we have it. Because now there I can go into edit mode and, for example, change this a little bit. Maybe here, this part I move up. So we see it changes this shape a little bit. Control R, maybe here. This one we move up, so it's a little bit arced. There. See? Now you can even see that this is not made out of metal, because with metal would be all manufactured the same. Maybe there's something else as a material selected, so fabric. Goody. Now these two selected. Shift D, we have to bring them up to there. And then we just need to try to eyeball the rotation as closely as possible so that it fits over the wood element correctly. Maybe let's go to local and select this one. This is rotated 15 degrees. So see here, we can now type in 15 and 15 in object mode. Another reason why I added an object mode in Blender are really very good for aligning objects. There. Perfect. And then maybe just to add a little bit more of variation to make them all unique. There we just play a little bit and change them, maybe like this, pull this down a little bit, and this one here maybe pull in, and I don't know, maybe this one we pull out. Okay, perfect. Good. So now you can see this actually, in case we would do a rendering or we show a view from the back, this shows you a little bit more of information. Great. So that's the fabric. Now we have to take a look at the wood part. So now with the wood parts, the system I will settle for is actually not using screws, but because this is all made of wood, actually use kind of like a dowel system. And then the dowels I would like to be maybe the same color, or we could even give them a color so that they stand out as like a nice detail. So maybe let's take a look at those elements here first. So how do we maybe position something nicely? And how do we even create the dowel stuff? So this is actually quite easy. First, with all these selected, hold the Alt key and then we turn off the bevel so we have perfect snap targets. And then we just position the 3D cursor roughly here, Shift A, make a plane, and then this plane we can scale down in edit mode. And in my case, along the x-axis, I rotate it by 90 degrees. Okay, and what I will do next is there I'm going to snap everything and snap everything and snap. Perfect. So, and then in object mode, I will go to Tools, Set Origin, Origin to Geometry, so that the square is perfectly centered on this joinery, and the object center is also right there. So why did I do this? Well, now with this rectangle in edit mode, I can scale it, for example, down, maybe something like this. And now I have kind of like an offset. And onto each point, I can, for example, position a cylinder. So click this one, cursor to select it, and then in object mode, not in edit mode, in object mode, I will Shift A, and then let's add a cylinder. Press T, so we see the amount of vertices. Let's set this to 64. The radius maybe 2.5 millimeters, and the depth 2 feet. Okay, and the rotation maybe 90. Whoops, not for this one, for X 90. Okay, good. Perfect. So this part I will scale a little bit. So local space, you see Z is actually this one, or in case you're in global, no, I can use Y. So S and Y. Let's scale this so it sticks through. Perfect. So now I can, with Alt D, for example, make a copy. Press Escape, and then I can snap it to there. But the problem is, you see, it snaps actually to the edge. But maybe I want actually this not snap to the edge. I want the center point of my object snapped to this point. So that's the reason why I actually created this plane at the center, because now in edit mode, Shift S, cursor to selected, position the 3D cursor, and then in object mode, select the cylinder, Shift S, and then selection to cursor. Perfect. And then Alt D, make another one, Alt D, make another one, and move them to somewhere else. And then here, now this one, I cursor to selected, selection to cursor, cursor to selected, selection to cursor. Okay, so it's basically like a move from one point to another point the object. Great. Now I have all those dowels created, so give them also a name. So for example, let's give this one lag, actually Boolean lag. How do we actually spell dowel? Let me check. Okay, so wooden dowel. Okay. We can copy this, the text, and then, for example, add this one to there, add this one to there, add this one to there. So they're all named logically. Perfect. This one, yeah, good. So here's a little shortcut. And what we will do is these 4 I want to cut out of the individual wood parts, but I don't want to add 4 modifiers for each dowel to cut through. So we will do a small variation of how we use the modifiers. So this is actually called, I call this one Boolean, so BOL, shortcut, lag dowel, so I know which one it is. And this one I will give a Boolean modifier, union, and then say, hey, you select this one, make a copy, select this one, make a copy, whoops, and select the last one. And you see now I have the individual objects and I have the main dowel, which includes now the geometry of all the other dowel cylinders. And what I can do now is simply, when I go to this and I say at the end Boolean difference, and then I select this object, so not the other two, because if I select this one, you see it only gives you this one cut or this cut. I want this one. And actually it uses the result of all the, well, basically it uses the result of the 3 Boolean operations we added to it. So let's go to here. There we also add the Boolean modifier and cut this one out. And nicely you see perfectly it matches. Now the great thing is, if for example we go into edit mode, because they all have the same mesh. So you see if we adjust this one, they all adjust because they're all linked, and also this updates. So that's actually pretty nice. Okay, let's undo this. Great. So, and we can also here, if we want, for example, this geometry call wooden dowel. So we can always find this geometry and share it among all other parts. Okay. So I hope this made sense. Now, we have something here. I would like to do the same. So what I have to do in this case is, there are two options we have. For example, we select the object which has the other modifiers. So that includes all the wooden dowels. And then we can give it an array. And for example, say, hey, you array 2 and move this one over. And we just have to try to find a good position for it. Let's say like there. Great. Okay, so you see it cut that out already. But the problem is it just cuts it in a way that looks like on the front leg, and there it makes sense because these are 90-degree angles, but here the backrest comes in actually at an angle. So do I want to do the same? So if we, that's now a design decision we have to make. Do we play with this being the same? Or do we try to make the dowels on the backrest line up actually with the angle of the backrest? And that is basically what I will do. So this one I will delete. However, this is going to be very easy. Make sure you select everything, so not only the individual, not only the Boolean object with the main parts, but actually with all. So, and then Alt D, and in my case along X, I move it over. So let's take a look where this one is there. And here I can move this one maybe to there. So I will position this point to here, and now the trick is, you see, when I say U and U, this is all selected because under here we have actually 2 objects. So there are multiple ways how we can select this one. So when you hold the Alt key and then left mouse button click on an object, it gives you a list if there are more objects. So number 1 or number 2, you see we want this one and this one. So it's one way. So this is what you want to have selected. Or in case you simply say B, drag a selection, and then this one is selected as well. Then B, and then with the middle mouse button, we drag over this one to deselect it. So these 2 are only selected. Okay. And then with those 2 at the same time, here I simply slide them over to the right. And now I can select everything there. and then bring it in and try to position it nicely so it's evenly spaced. Like this. Perfect. Okay. Now here we will add a Boolean modifier difference. And so what's the name for this object? So maybe this one we call actually backrest. So it makes sense. Because you see at one point you have so many dowels, you have no idea what's going on. There. And it's cut out. And let's maybe this one we call front leg as a master part. So this is updated, and then copy, delete this input, and then here we use the backrest there. Perfect. See, that looks actually pretty nice. Great. Now we have actually all the holes cut for our dowels to be inserted. So how do we do the dowels now? I would not put them on the same layer, and also you see here we might run into some other issues because we don't want to have dowels of this length. So what could we do here in addition? Well, we can build dowels on our own. We can trim them. We can mirror something. So there are two ways. We can actually build new objects that go flush in there, or we actually use this design where we have with the dowels, make a copy, and then simply we trim these parts. The main reason why to do it this way is actually, so let's say we Alt D, again we have to make a copy, a linked one of all, so the same, escape, move them onto a different layer. And this, for example, now we call, this is not bool, this is actually the actual lag dowel for the front. And then this is not the bool, this is actually the actual lag dowel for the backrest. Okay, actually, let's do it this way. What crazy naming did I give this? There, dowel front leg, dowel backrest. Okay, so these two objects, I actually move onto a different layer, and this maybe makes it now a little bit easier to understand what's going on. So you see, these are now my actual objects. And I will turn this layer on, and this layer, and this layer. So, and the last layer, by the way, you always click, and that is the active layer you're working on. So this is actually the layer where I have my Boolean objects. And good, actually I spotted this. You see, they're actually all not on the 0 point for the y-axis. So select all these objects, hold the Alt key, and then press in my case, they're Y, 0, enter, and you see they're all snapped to the Y position, 0. Correct. Good. Where do I have this? Here's this one. They're all 0 now. They're not. So here, Alt key, hold it, 0 and enter. So we just moved them. Want to see where's that small rectangular plane? There. That's offender because that was off. Everything else actually moved. So, and then this one I will move to this layer. So I have all my Boolean objects here. Okay, perfect, good. Sorry for the distraction. And what we will do now, cursor to selected or cursor to center, make a plane. And now we will do a little bit of modeling, and we just create a cavity in this area there, and then Control R, make a cut, 0, enter X and delete. This one, for example, I can remove as well, I don't need it. And then here I will E and Y, move this one up and snap it to this point. And then maybe I move this one down, maybe like there. Perfect. Or I can even keep it there, it doesn't really matter. But what I need to do now is in edit mode, I have to press E to extrude, and then I extrude them above the wooden dowels. Make sure that also the normals are faced outwards. You can see that the mesh looks kind of bluish, and that's an indicator for the surface being inverted. When we're in edit mode and we turn on the normals and we take a look, there we can see the normals face inwards. So not good. So in this case, we go to shading and UV, have everything selected, recalculate, and you see they flip outside. We can turn this off and we're good. Perfect. So this one we call maybe Boolean dowel trim. We can give this a mirror modifier. And before I add the mirror modifier, I want you to pay attention to something. You see, I snapped my 3D cursor to there, to this plane, and then I created a new plane and just modeled my geometry there by while maintaining my object center there. Because when I now turn on the mirror modifier along Y, you see it flips over. So I don't have to use, in this case, this one, because I modeled it already in a way that it has its object center at the center, because the mirror command works over this origin. Okay, so now this one we should maybe move to a different layer. Let's say I put it to there. Okay, so this is now the last step we have to do. Boolean intersect, and this is the Boolean, it's somewhere, dowel trim, ching, there. So instead of union or difference, in this time I select intersect, which actually will keep the intersecting volume. So here one more time, Boolean intersect. And that's, for example, now shows you why you should name your objects so later you find them, otherwise you are lost. So for example, the name I selected is kind of silly. I will, for example, say wooden dowel, Boolean dowel intersect something, or a different name, so it makes more sense. Okay, you saw sometimes the modifiers go away or the results don't show up. Then the easiest way, select the object, edit mode, leave edit mode, and we're back. And then you see everything. It has to recreate the mesh. Good. So one last detail maybe that's left. Now after we did these nice trims, this is perfectly flush. Now it's a question, do we want them to be pressed in so it's perfectly flush, or do we want to have a little like edge? So we can add a bevel command zoom to there, and then the bevel command we set to angle, so it only rounds actually sharp edges, not everything. Maybe we set this to 10, and then this 0.5 millimeters. So, whoa, this is actually 0.5 millimeters. It's already pretty big, you see. And maybe let's go to there. Also here, bevel 0.5 millimeters. We will give this one 10 there, an angle. Okay. So it's up to you to decide if you want to make it look this way or if we rather keep them flush. And to be honest, flush actually will look nicer. So we just force them in, we don't have any gaps. Because now we have kind of like a wood insert. So the dowels we can then use as a visual element. Okay, before we continue, the last thing that's really important is actually to make sure that all those elements we created, so the dowels and then the Boolean shapes for the dowels, they're all linked to this one. Control P. So later when we rotate everything back, also the dowels will move with it. Okay, so you see now this looks much nicer, gives you a little bit more of detail how things can be constructed. So the last thing left is maybe considering now how do we do the fastening actually of those on the main legs, and basically we can use the same idea of a wooden dowel like we did with the bigger lumber parts. Okay, so where do we start? So there is the object center, and then we can say Shift S cursor to selected. So you see the selected actually the center there, and then Shift A, and we will add a cylinder. Now in this case this is way too long, so maybe 4 inches. This is still pretty tall, so maybe 3 inches. Let's take a look at this part. Yeah, this will be good. Okay, goodie. Let's rotate this one, and then we can move this, for example, maybe to there, so it sticks out a little bit. Okay, and should we do it? Yes, we will do it. So we will reset the object origin also to still where my 3D cursor is. Origin to 3D cursor. There. So why did I do this? Well, first I can move this one over now, but I want this one to be positioned perfectly at the center. So how do I figure out the center? Well, I have a leg, and the leg as an object I can read out the position. So I can copy this one, go to my dowel, and paste this one in. So you see I position my 3D cursor at this plank because this is actually the midpoint. Then there I created the cylinder, and then I moved it over and then used the position of this lumber part to figure out where I want or have to position this one. Then also here I can do a check, so this maybe does not interfere with the rest, and it doesn't. Perfect. Good. So let's say we call this one bool plank to dowel. Okay, also give this the name there. Then let's do an array, maybe 4, and then we can spread this one out. So the problem is now, well, I would have to eyeball actually the position of where this one has to go to. So let's say we would like to rather figure out the correct position. If I go into edit mode, I'm back to this part. So there's no mesh, I could click. So here's a little trick. Shift D, we make a copy, press escape so we don't move it, and then we will apply the array modifier. Then we can go into edit mode. Here we make a loop cut. And for example, the lower part here we can delete. So, and now when we select this one and hide it, and select this one, now we can, maybe from the front will be easier to see. Let's hide this one. Now we only have to adjust this value, for example, to slide it up a little bit more. So can either try to do it this way, but just some numeric values. Maybe 4. Looks like 3, 7, 3, 6. Perfect. So you see, I try to match actually this line to this line. That's actually the midpoint of the cylinder. Okay, good. That's fine. Now this one actually I can delete because I don't need it anymore. That was just a visual helper. And now I have my object center point there. So if I now say mirror, I need to have something to mirror over. So in this case, I can't use the object center point, but I need to use the axes we created. So the empty, set the values correct, and there we are. Great. So let's actually there and there we will do the same. So also here, maybe let's move this one to this layer. Alt D. Let's maybe move this to somewhere else. So there is my object there. Okay. So how do we do this? Now to figure this out, we see that this is at a position X there. So this one, for example, we could paste. Then we can rotate this one by 90 degrees. And then this offset, we actually do the opposite direction. Okay. And now I would like this object center to line up exactly with this edge up there. So let me show you how we can do this. So when, for example, I select this point and say Shift S cursor to select it, it snaps to cursor to there. But now I can say you snap to there, but you see it will be offset. That's not really what I want. But the 3D cursor is an object, kind of like which I can read out. So here's my height. I can copy this one. And then I paste this one to here for the dowel. And you see it moves up. This plank and this plank are exactly the same, which is I only needed to reposition this dowel element and then it perfectly fits to the center parts. Good. Now let's take a look at this one. This is going to be a little bit more complicated. So Alt D, let's move it to there. I will show you a different way how to position this. So the object center has a Z, X, and a Y. The Y, for my dowels, I do not want to adjust. I only want to get the Z and the X value. And you see here I have X, Y, and Z. So click the dowel, click the backrest, and then right click and say not copy all, but copy single to selected. So now we actually copied the x-axis and now we copy the y-axis. See, perfect. Now this has to be rotated this way by -75. Why do I know -75? If I take a look upper right corner, you see actually the value. So now I can type in -75, enter, and I have to flip the value for the array modifier to make it grow that way again. So here now I have a similar issue. Let's see. 4, does it fit? I don't think this perfectly fits. So Shift D, escape, apply. Then let's make a loop cut, press 0 and enter. And then we can delete these parts. This part I hide so it's easier to see. But okay, it is actually perfectly centered. So I double checked. So this step was not necessary. Okay, great. Now there you can basically see the drill holes we could insert for the dowels. Now we can keep them a little bit shorter. So this is because we have to really put in long dowels. So any object we can select, doesn't matter which one, we just shorten this a little bit. And because again, these are all linked, so they all use the same mesh, you see they're all updated. Perfect. So there are only a few steps left. We could, for example, call this one wood plank dowel backrest, so it makes sense. This is actually back leg, and this is maybe front leg. So you add a modifier. You can, for example, say copy there, rest, backrest, there should be, see, which is the name, I forgot them already. So what was the name? Bool plank dowel backrest. Okay, so in those cases, now you see it's easier and just then to see the object. So we can eye drop him. Whoop, that's not the correct object. I want this one. And here, Boolean difference, and this one. So this is actually something I do after the mirror. So also here, maybe the mirror command we can move down. So it's actually less work. Or I can keep it for the moment there, or we'll do an adjustment later. The main point is I have these dots on left and the right side. So I actually cut left and right. But I might, with these wood planks, only have to cut actually the left one first, and then once everything's done, then remirror the rest over. Okay, good. Then we can actually show those there, because now here we have to do the same as well. Boolean difference, this one there, Boolean drop this one and Boolean difference there. Okay, now they all have their holes. Great. So now we have to create the individual dowels as well. Alt, do we do an Alt-E or Shift-E? Now we want to have separate. Now we can do an Alt-E. Yeah, it should be all the same. Alt-D, escape. And I move them to layer 7. So how do we now make these dowels shorter so that we actually only get the type of how could I say that, the length of the dowel we need? So we need to trim them. So you see I reuse the geometry from the object that cuts the hole for the dowels to get in, but these dowels obviously are too long on top. How far they go down, that is good, because that's basically the depth of my drilling hole. So what we will simply do is something like this. So maybe Shift S, cursor to center, let's make a plane, and then with this plane I move this one to this point, and I move this one to this point, delete this, E and Z snap to the height. You see I tried to build a mesh exactly going along this area. There I make a small corner, and then E and Z for the height, and then along the X and Control, and there it snapped. So I press Control all the time and hold it while pressing to have the snapping turned on. Okay, so this is now one object, and this one I can call maybe wood plank dowel trim. Wood plank dowel trim. Okay, and that's easy to remember. Let's maybe put this onto a different layer, and then you Boolean. It's trim. We only have few objects with trim. So Boolean wood plank dowel trim. There, this one. And there, trim. And you see they get just a notch shorter. Okay, perfect. But also here, make sure that everything we select here will be parented. So all this, so the wooden dowels and the Boolean wooden dowels, and then the surface that trims them. Select the empty, Control P, parent. And then this we can all hide. And I would say we're done. So now we have created a nice extra detail for all these wooden parts. So then the only question left is, how do we texture it? This element is actually 5 millimeter wide, so it's not very, very big. So what we can, for example, do in this case is honestly you get actually this wood material, 3D new, U and U and U, Control L, copy the material from the white selected object. Okay, and let's take a look there. U and U, and you Control L, copy material. Great. And there's this, you, and material. Now, in terms of material, that will work out for this. It will not really work out for those. This obviously has to be a different material, but color-wise, it sticks in. And this is not 100% realistic, but again, we're trying only to create something in terms of realism, so that for need of a concept model, this is still sufficient to explain the story. Hence the shortcut. Okay, let's show all this and this. And then here, this was 20.5. I forgot to parent those. So you, and you parented to the empty. And 20.5. So now let's do a rendering, preview. Yeah, it looks quite good. So from a distance, people will read, so this is maybe some sort of fabric, this is fabric. Obviously, when we show a really close up, then we will see something is not correct here, but that's maybe something we would only do for final rendering, when we want to show like details and explain more, and then in that case, maybe we can put more time into the correct material. Again, bigger problem, chop it off into smaller problems. So where are our dowels? They're so hidden you don't even see them. So I would like those, for example, to stick out a little bit, since we did all that work for it. So we will do something like this. So a node material. So do we use the same material? But again, I mentioned this is just such a tiny object, it's really kind of pointless to really try to texture it correctly. So I will do this. I will simply say this is a dowel material. So it has a different color, and then to maybe see actually the color, hold on, there, where's the one I selected? Give me 1 second. So dowel, okay, good. And then those should actually be the dowel, okay. Dowel, okay, perfect. So they all have the same color now. Good. So, because I created a different material, most of this texture is all the same, but now here I can feel this, adjust this, for example, a little bit, and hope that maybe they stand out a tick more. And there is number one, you see. And there it is. So they're not very dark standing out, so maybe I want to do this a little bit more. And there. And maybe there. This is actually for the grain. Might not need to be very sorry, what I wanted to say, for the grain you might not see it, but maybe you see some of the color adjustments we still kind of can see. Okay, perfect. And then you see in the rendering dot. Goodie. Okay, so that was one way. We could also just have made a very basic material and just give it a normal color and call it good. That could have worked as well, but in my case I simply made a duplicate of the material and then adjusted the color values. Great. Now we're ready to basically, and I will show you that in the next class, how we can create our rendering, and then do the backdrop, add lights, add a camera, track the camera, and then render.